Nawa,
Off na naka
nawa,
mic ha. Wala man.
nawala, day?
Wala. Sige, start na ate. Kaya nag-record na ko.
Sige, magkuha na ko. Sugod na ko.
Okay. Greet sa...
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Our report with Miss Banji Manigos is one of the fiction story of the author named Shirley Jackson entitled The Lottery. A Scary Day, Ladies and Gentlemen. And it is the book of... Guy, nakadungog ka. Nag-record ako. Nag-start ako.
Oo, sige. Padayon ate. Kaya naka-record na ko.
Banji,
Oh, padayon lang. Padayon lang. Nag-record na ko.
Guy,
Oh.
nadungog na ni mo?
Oh, nadungog ra. Sige,
Nag-start
padayon.
na ka?
Oh.
Okay. Speaking of lottery, it means a raffle. Then we have the scrambled word, the act of killing by throwing stone to someone. It is called stoning. Then number 2, a gambling game usually organized to raise money. It is called lottery. It is the biggest gambling game in the country, the casino, and what agency in the Philippines operates the questions in for it is called the PAGCOR, meaning the Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation, which is legal, licensed, and regulated here in the Philippines. Then we have the questions here, but before we answer these questions, that would you like to join the lottery if ever you live in the place where the story happened? Please listen to our discussion attentively so that you can understand the full story. The background of the story, written in 1948, The Lottery by Shirley Jackson is a work of fiction that demonstrates conformity and rebellion while suggesting that the lottery is ritualistic ceremony. Meaning it ritualistic, it is a ritual. There is a religious ceremony. The lottery combines a peaceful small town America setting with a horrific shock ending. 1948, in the New Yorker magazine, the lottery is reported to have generated more negative letters from readers than any other story previously published by the magazine. Many canceled their subscription to the magazine. Meaning in this time, the lottery, when published by the New Yorker magazine, many people don't like the story which the New Yorker magazine published. Then the readers were offended by the work and its suggestions that evil could be so easily and commonly carried out. They felt the stoning was a pointless, arbitrary, violent sacrifice. Meaning arbitrary, it is acting without thought what is fair or right. Then the background of the author, named Shirley Hardy Jackson, which is born in December 14, 1916 in San Francisco, California in USA, died of heart failure on August 8, 1965 in Bennington, Vermont. Meaning Shirley Jackson died when she is 49 years old. Jackson received her BA in English from Syracuse University. Married with Stanley Edgar Hyman, a staff writer and literary critic at the New Yorker in the 1940s. She and Hyman had 4 children. The tone of the most of her works is odd and macabre, meaning strange, out of ordinary. Then macabre or macabre, having death as a subject. With an impending sense of doom, other framed by very ordinary settings and characters. The characters of the story, The Lottery, we have that number one, Tessie Hutchinson. She's the one who is protesting that it is the lottery was not fair and the one being stoned to death. Then, number two, we have Mr. Joe Summers. He runs a coal business. Then, number three, Mr. Harry Graves, the postmaster. Mr. Graves helps Mr. Summers prepare the papers for the lottery and assist him during the ritual. Then, number four, Old Man Warner, the character who wants to preserve the culture. Then, number five, in the characters of the story, we have Mrs. Graves, is the wife of Mr. Graves. She tells it's fair. After all, everyone took an equal chance. Mr. Bill Hutchinson is the husband of Tess Hutchinson. When she protests his selection in the lottery, he tells her to shut up. The Hutchinson children are named Bill, Junior, Nancy, and Dave. Nancy has supporters in the crowd who openly express hope that she is not the one chosen. Then number nine, we have Mr. and Mrs. Martin, are the parents of Baxter and Bobby. They run the grocery store. Then number 10, the Baxter Martin is the eldest son in the Martin family. We have Mr. and Mrs. Adams is the first person to draw in the lottery, which makes sense alphabetically. Then the Delacroix family, the Watsons, the Dunbars, the boys, Bobby Martin, Dickie Delacroix, and Harry and Bobby Jones. And now we proceed to the summary of the story, The Lottery. On the late summer morning, the villagers of the small town gathered to conduct their annual lottery. There is an air of festivity among them, especially the children. Only a few in the crowd reveal slight hints of tension or unease. The lottery has a long history in this and surrounding towns. The people who run it in this town, Mr. Summers and Mr. Graves, work hard to preserve the rituals that have been passed down from year to year. Changes have crept in, and some old-timers, such as Old Man Warner, regret what they perceive as a loss of a heritage that has preserved the happiness and prosperity of the town. Because the people in this village believe that they need to have this kind of ritual to have a good harvest for the corn. Then all the villagers finally arrived. Tessie Hutchinson being one of the last. Mr. Summers conducts the preliminaries, ensuring that each family is represented and that those who are absent have someone on hand to draw for them. Finally, the lottery begins. Heads of families step forward and draw small paper sticks from the black box. What Mr. Summer keeps on for the occasion. As this goes on, townspeople engage in small talk, and the air of festivity gives way to a pervasive aura of nervousness. It means that yearly, this town, the villagers of the town do the ritual of having the lottery. Then, when all the slips are drawn, Bill Hutchinson discovers that he has picked the one marked with a black spot. So, ang nakagunit day una day sa paghulbot niya sa raffle, ang nakaunag kuha na may black spot si Bill Hutchinson. That immediately, Tessie begins complaining that the drawing was not conducted properly. So ang iyang asawa nga si Tessie Hutchinson, panang ni-disagree siya ba kay tunya ka ng unfair ang lottery. Gusto siya nga na fairness nga mahitabo. Ano kung na iyang bana mo yung nakakuha ko na itong black spot. Others encourage her to be a good sport. However, her protest fall on deaf ears. Maminaw niya ni Tessie Hutchinson sa iyang complaint about sa netabo sa iyang bana nga may nakakuha nga sa katong naay black spot. She and the other members of her immediate family now come forward and draw slips as various townspeople whisper apprehensively. Tessie draws a slip with the black spot. Mr. Summers commands, "Let's finish quickly." So, ningon na lang si Mr. Summers, sige, usbo na lang nato. Motong ilan lang giusab. So, pag-usab nila, ang nakakuha sa na black spot, kay si Kuana hinoon si Tessie Hutchinson, ang asawa ni Bill Hutchinson. The townspeople now move off to the cleared spot outside the town. Tessie is the center of the group, a desperate woman now. Tessie entreats the crowd to go through the ritual again. Doing things fairly, ignoring her protest, the men, women, and children of the town begin stoning her. Mo din ang ilahang kuano, ang ilang lottery, ilang raffle nga. Hindi sa silang ritual ba, patyo nila sa pinagi sa pagbato ba, sa raffle sila, murag
Yes,
money
ate.
sacrifice nila ba para sa ilahang
Oo.
kwan, dagang sila mag-harvest na corn.
Sacrifice, no?
Then the setting of the story, in a warm day in late June, sakripisyo nila ha, kanang mo, kwan sila blood ba. The 27th, to be exact, the villagers gather in the square. No, Jackson didn't specify the exact place where the event took place. Some critics of the story claim that it was in England, but some claim it was in United States because the only clue given by Jackson is that it is a small village which is merely composed of 300 people. So ang atong setting, wala siya nagkuhan kung asa yung lugar. Basta ang iyahang pag-narrate, ningon na siya nga, small village, yan na siya, ni-compose siya mga 300 katao. It means small town na yun siya. Then the point of view of the story, it is a third-person objective. Because the narrator remain outside the character's mind. They only present dialogues and recounting events. Thus, they allow readers to interpret the actions as well as the dialogues of the characters. Without interference, the narrator is not part of the story. That's why it's third person. Then, in the character, we have the dynamic and the static. Ang atong dynamic, it means kanang kuha na siya, mag-usap-usap siya na siya changes. Ang static, permanente lang. So, sa dynamics siya si Tessie Hutchinson in her view of the lottery. Diba, usap-usap man ito yung panglantaw sa kuan, bahay sa lottery. Na siya positive na hunahuna, tapos siya negative hunahuna. Kung itong siya, daghan siya o ka ng kuan gani, sige siya ingon nga, sige siya reklamo ba nga unfair. Bahin sa ilang draw. Mrs. Graves in their treatment to Tessie. Then we have Mrs. Delacroix in their treatment to Tessie. Then in the static of the character, in their attitude in the lottery, we have Mr. Joe Summers, Mr. Graves, Mrs. Delacroix, Mr. Bill Hutchinson, Mr. Harry Graves, Oldman Warner, Mr. and Mrs. Martin, Baxter Martin, Mr. and Mrs. Adams. Then the motivation of the story, lottery in June, corn be heavy soon. So, it meaning, kung may kong lottery in June, corn will be heavy soon. Kaya, kuan man na, mo harvest good ang kaniang corn, ma-harvest na to every 3 months, man good. Sa to pa, quarterly, January, February, March, then we have April, May, June. It means, kaning time na nag-kuan sila, na sila raffle sa lottery nila, kuan is, time nga mag-harvest sila sa ilahang di pananom. Then we have the exposition of the story. The morning of June 27th was clear and sunny with a fresh, warm, or full summer day. The flowers are blossoming profusely and the grass was richly green. Then the rising action of the story, when they started the lottery, the representative of the fathers of the families started to pick the strips of paper from the black box, starting with Mr. Adams, because the basis of picking strips is alphabetically. Ang ilang pagkuano, mga papa ang mukuan man ani, ang head of the families man ang muhulbot, so magsugod jud og kanang ang ilang apelyido alphabetically. Si Mr. Adams nag-start ani. Then the climax
Ate,
of the
nawala.
story, when Tessie Hutchison knew that she picked the paper with a black mark.
Ate,
Katong
excuse
time
me,
na
nawala imong
siya din
kuan, ate.
nakapunit nga na black
Nawala
mark,
imong
it means nga siya
share,
din mo nahay ka ng chance mo sugi din mabato. Imuha na sunod ay.
Ate, nawala imong
Kani falling action. Tapos sa
Ibalik.
ako sa i-mute sila ko kung mic day.
Ate, balik ko palihog, ate, nawala imong presentation. Palihog ko, balik share screen, ate, nawala man.
What?
Oh, nawala,
Balik
ate.
balik tayo sa ha.
Ibalik, ate,
Ikaw,
palihog.
lagi tayo kadit sa. Dahil, kadungog ka na ako.
Oh, madungog
Okay,
ra
okay.
ate.
Okay. Ikaw na. Ako sa ikuan. Ako sa i-share sa balik. Ano na?
Oh, ate, nakita na.
Dai.
Oo, so... Oh, sige, palihog ko, ate. Sa ako ang part.
Wait sa. No, ni balik ko. Okay, balik na ako kalit sa. Yung sinimil ka ng balik. Kita ni sa screen room. Hindi mo kuha na. Hindi din kami sinubuang. Buto! Go yung isa. Lagay. Ikaw na dahil dito naman ta sa kuan sa 20 nga slide. 21 na ta nga slides.
Okay, ate, palihog ko, ate, sa 21.
Dahil. Dili lang ako i-off ako mic.
I-off ra na imong mic, ate, para di ta mag-echo. Nga ka nang paminaw lang nako para masunod.
Okay.
Okay, so now...
Ako sa i-off ha.
Ano, sige.
Balik ko sa meet.
Okay, so good evening once again. So we are now down to the following action. So the following action of the story, the lottery. So it's when the people started to prepare the stones with Mrs. Hutchinson complaining, saying, "It isn't fair." And then the denouement or the resolution, the people started to stone her to death. So nagsugod na og pamato ni Mrs. Hutchinson ang mga tao sa village. And then, so we have the other elements present in the story. We have here the what's so called the foreshadowing. So hint provocatively at what is to come. So at the end of the lottery, the reader discovers with horror what is about to happen. So the story ends with the casting of the first stones. So Jackson prefers to leave the gruesome details to the reader's imagination. And then we also have here the conflict. So the conflict of... Excuse me, ate, nawala, ate. Ate Clara, nawala ang kuan, ate. Ate Clara, madungog ko nimo, nawala ang presentation, te. Okay, so back to the conflict. So the conflict, nawala na sad. Nawala na sad ate, paliw ko balik ate. Sa connection jud na nimo. Sa conflict ate, baliw ko sige. So the conflict occurs when nanasad. Steady ate, ayo ikong koan. Okay, so the conflict occurs when TC starts sa conflict pati ha, complaining that his husband wasn't given. Wait sa ate. Balik ate, balik babaw. Ate Clara, ibalik sa conflict ate, palihog, wala pa dito pata. Okay, stop natin. Sus. Ate, luhag kay imong presentation. Sa conflict pa. Dili dira, babaw pa ta. Balik babaw ate, balihog ate. Sige pa. Okay, dara, stop ate, stop. So the conflict once again is occurs when TC starts complaining that his husband wasn't given ample time to pick. And then the similar practice with the story, in ancient Athens, Greece, Athenians believed that human sacrifice promised fertile crops. Each year in ancient Athens, as one story goes, during the annual festival called Thargelia, citizens would stone to death a man and a woman selected for this purpose. So, ilaha jud ay ni siyang tradition. Stoning to death. Kung kinsay mapilian. And then, the death was thought to bring prosperity to the community. So, they believe that ang death kuno would bring prosperity to their community. So, a similar ritual, it is a ritual sacrifice occurs with T.C. Hutchinson. So, T.C. man to ang napilian. So, it means siya ang nag-sacrifice. So this explains the village members' remark, lottery in June, corn to be heavy son. So as what Ate Clara said, ting-ani siya nga time. And then, i-down, obos ate, next ate, slide. Please ko sa next slide, Ate Clara. Next sa koan. Quotation na lottery in June. Maklaro ko ni Ate Clara.
Nawala yung tingog. Putol-putol ka.
O sige, ibalik ate.
Putol-putol yung tingog.
O ibalik ate, wala pa ko nahuman kaysa sa
Oy, balik na ako kay putol.
okay ra sa recording man gud kay ma-okay ra ni siya, klaro ra ni siya. Kana next ana ate, next anang lottery in June. So, probing deeper in the story, is there a conflict between men and women in the story? So a conflict between male authority and female resistance is subtly evident throughout the lottery. So of course, makita dyo dito ang conflict between the male, ang power sa male over the female. And then we have here the male versus female. So early in the story, the boys make a great pile of stones. So start pa lang sa story, katunay mga bata dito, pile of stones in one corner of the square, while the girls kuno stand aside talking amongst themselves. While ang mga babae dito nagtabi ra sa kilid, looking over their shoulders at the boys. So when Tizzy draws the paper with the black mark on it, Tizzy does not show it to the crowd. Instead, her husband Bill for her hand and holds it up. Okay, we are now down to the symbolism. So the symbolism on things, the black. So the black is the color for death, mourning, punishment, the penitence in Western civilization. The black box may be caffeine. And the black spot is symbolized as the death, the sin, or unclean. Then down to the symbolism on the names. Symbols and names, we have T.C. Hutchinson, most likely an allusion to Anne Hutchinson, 1591 to 1643, an American religious enthusiast who founded the Puritan colony of Rhode Island. So she had the new theological views which opposed her to other ministers. So after a local trial banished her, she was tried before Boston Church and formally excommunicated. Anne and 15 of her children were subsequently murdered by the Indians in 1643. And then the parallelism we have between her story and Tizzy's is clear. To her, excommunication meant spiritual death, just as to Tizzy being cast out from the group. So, it was death. Next, Ate Clara, sa symbolism. So, I hope everyone is still listening. So, symbolism on names, we also have here the Delacroix of the cross. So, vulgarized to Delacroix, no longer truly of the cross. So, some critics suggest that Mrs. Delacroix represents the duality of human nature. So, she is pleasant and friendly on the outside, but underneath, she possesses a degree of savagery. Savage. Then we have summers. So, the season of summer is associated with youth, strength, growth, prime of life, warmth, leisure, prosperity, happiness, blooming, blossom. So, Mr. Summers is the head of the coal business. So, which could symbolize close contacts with the underworld. So, evil lurking just beneath the surface. So, coal is earthly. So, as opposed to heavenly, black form in the process of many years, long-term process. So, formed from compressed, decaying matter, early chemistry use a black spot to symbolize coal. So, Marxist critics point out how Mr. Summers, who would have been one of the wealthier citizens, so lead the lottery. So, si Mr. Summers is the one who lead the lottery. So, this with money, the control, the people's activities. So, siya ang gadala sa power, the control sa ilang village. And then, we also have their graves. The obvious grave, place of entombment or death. So, Mr. Graves quietly assists Mr. Summers. So, siya to ang assistant ni Mr. Summers. So, with Graves, hinting at a dark undertone. So, grave equals serious. You have the hint, the lottery may not be a frivolous contest. Mr. Graves said gravely. Ikaw nati, palihog ko next ati. So, critics have said that Jackson creates balance by juxtaposing by Summers and Mr. Graves to share in the responsibilities of the ritual. So life brings death and death recycles life. And then we have also here Adams. So reference to the first man, the first sinner. Okay, so while he seems to be one of the few who questions the lottery, when he mentioned that other village is thinking about giving up the ritual, he stands at the front of the crowd when the stoning of TC begins. So like the biblical Adam, Adam goes along with the sin. He follows others in their evil. Then the old man, Warner, resistance to change and representing the old social order. He warns about how important siya itong important event to survival of the village. So old man Warner is 77 years old. The number 7 has many connotation, but one common connotation is that 7 is lucky. So he has been lucky to avoid the lottery so many times. Maoday na siya ang kang old man Warner symbolize. And we also have Dunbar. So breaking this name down into 2 syllables, one can come up with one dun, to treat cruelly or a dull brownish gray color. And bar is something that impedes or prevents action or progress. Next, ate. Okay, relatively long, straight, rigid piece of solid material. Use a barrier, support, or the fastener. A standard expectation or degree of requirements. So that was Dunbar symbolized. And then we are now to the themes of the story. So one is that not all rituals are beneficial, positive, or civilized. And then the acts of violence, hatred, murder are not acceptable just because many people participate. Yes, of course. And then the traditions and rituals should be questioned. Group mentality can be harmful. Sa ila mo na mga tuod tinuhuan nila. Not all jud. It's not good. Just like what the story end. So people are not all good or all evil, but a mixture of both. Then the society, you're up to me, determine the fate of a person. And then the Shirley Jackson, we have here the Shirley Jackson response. So generally, she refused to explain the meaning of the story. So wala jud siya naghatag og saktong explanation sa iyang story. And then she did once tell a journalist. So na siya gisulti sa usa ka journalist, which is, I suppose, I hope, but setting a particularly brutal right in the present and in my own village to shock the readers with a graphic demonstration of the pointless violence and general inhumanity of their own lives, I gather that in some cases, the mind just rebels. So the number of people who expected Mrs. Hutchinson to win a Bendix washer at the end would amaze you. So that was his point of view. And then the quote of the story. So the quote of the story is that although the villagers forgotten the ritual and the original black box, they still remembered to use the stones. Then, next, ate, I guess that was all. Okay, that's all. Thank you. Ate Clara, I will now
Thank you for
end the meet.
listening, classmate.
Thank you so much.
Yes, Dan.